What up? What up? Mic check 1 2 1 2. Mic check 1 2 1 2. Checking in on this Monday. What's happening, everybody? Thumbs up in the chat. Let's get everybody in here, man. We got a lot to speak about today. As usual, there's no shortage in content when it comes to the hip hop world. Man, there was a lot of things that I really wanted to address on today's show, but I think that my top 10 hip hop albums and top 10 hip hop songs is definitely going to be in the mix because I saw a lot of people putting their list together. Shout out to you guys out there who, chiming in from the Mad Maxes of the world. What up? What up, L Boogs? What up, everybody? I'm saying, Ron put together his list. Leroy put together his list. Sir Vaughn put together his list. He'll be joining me in a second. Shout out to him. Glad he is well. I know I had Leroy chiming in with me last week, which was fun. Me and him going back and forth is a classic. But yes, so I'm gonna reveal my list. No secret on what my album of the year is. If you were watching yesterday's episode, last week's episode, we're definitely gonna talk about this Fat Joe stuff. I definitely want to speak on that. I was debating on when I wanted to actually do my opening monologue on, but I think that we could really draw out this whole conversation as it pertains to Fat Joe, Lord Jamar, Foundational Black Americans, and everything that is all encompassed with that. And shout out to the Weekend Rhyme. They discussed a little bit of it yesterday as well. And I wanted to put my 2 cents in there as well. Because, I've met Tariq Nasheed, good brother, interviewed him. Look forward to interviewing him again as well. And we spoke about Mike Check, and I've seen the documentary. The documentary is dope. Have a lot to say about that as well. But I wanted to start off this show talking about the first week numbers of Snoop and Dr. Dre's, Snoop's album Missionary, produced by Dr. Dre. It is being reported that Missionary is first week sales look around 36,000. Yeah. That's right. You saw Fat Joe performing at the World Series. Yeah, we're gonna get into our Fat Joe discussion. And you guys know I had a little Fat Joe diatribe, I would say earlier this year. We were talking about top 50 MCs, but we'll talk about this. 36,000 units is what is being reported. Not sure if it's official yet, but I think one of the things that's blaring to me is for a lot of the people who are in, let's just say, the Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre demographic that I come across, I'm hyped up about the album, and I'm talking to people, and they didn't know anything about the album being released. Now, that's not to say that, Snoop and Dre aren't doing media. They weren't doing press. They were doing all kind of press. They were doing all kind of media. They were doing mainstream media and mainstream press. And it's I just think it's interesting that the older hip hop demographic, and I'm not talking about, some of the people in this room, because some of the people in this room are not some of the people in this room. The people that are in this room and in these conversations are music heads, are hip hop heads. We're talking about the pedestrian fan, which is, at the end of the day, that's kind of what the music industry thrives on, right? They thrive on the pedestrian fan, the fan who is, kind of into what's hot now, as opposed to being a core music fan. Because us core music fans, it takes a lot to sell us a lot of times. But saying all that to say, the older hip hop fans who are pedestrian fans, what does it take to get them to know that a release is coming out from one of their favorite MCs? I saw this a lot when Common and Pete Rock dropped. Like, a lot of people who were supposed to be hip hop fans or fans of, Common, and loved his work in the 90s, early 2000s or whatever, they were unaware of this collaboration. They were unaware of this album actually dropping. And I just find it very interesting that when it comes to gossip per se, or when it comes to, whatever latest case that Diddy has going on, or the latest thing that Jaguar Wright said, or whatever's going on with, Dame and Jay, it seems like the older hip hop demographic is in tune with that. But when it comes to actual music releases, the older hip hop demographic is nowhere near where the younger demographic is as far as understanding when these releases are coming out. Because the younger demographic, they know when their artists are dropping. And when their artists are dropping, they're going out there pressing play on this stuff over and over. Now, I'm not sitting here saying that people need to go out there and run their Spotify's while they're asleep just to run the numbers up. But again, I saw this with Nas, you know what I'm saying? And me and my former co-host, we talked about these things when we're talking about King's Disease 1, King's Disease 2, even when Magic dropped. The numbers that, came about with that, it's like, I think a lot of people are just unaware. And I don't know what it is going to take for a certain hip hop audience or a certain hip hop demographic to be receptive to new music from their favorite artists, because what we've seen this year is something that we've never really seen before. LL Cool J is a superstar. You know what I'm saying? LL Cool J is a superstar, produced by Q-Tip. LL did all the rounds. LL was out there doing media everywhere. He was out there doing press. I don't want to say you can't say that you didn't know this was coming out, but if you didn't know this was coming out, you're not really paying attention to music, period. And at this point, when you have somebody like a Snoop and Dre, and Snoop's probably one of the most famous, if not the most famous rapper ever. Dr. Dre's up there as well. When they're out here doing rounds, doing media, and talking about new music, and those numbers don't click in that way, Snoop and Dre have always done numbers. And that kind of just lets you know where this demographic is when it comes to new music from their favorite artists. And then we wonder why we don't get music from our favorite artists in that way. I mean, what does that artist, other than the love of it all, what does that artist have to prove? And why would an artist go out there and put in that level of work and put in that level of effort when all their audience wants to hear from them, or their core audience wants to hear from them, is nostalgic music from their formative years? I mean, we got to ask ourselves, man, like, how is that fair to the artists that keep moving and keep going? And then we keep praising people who don't even give that attempt, like an Andre 3000 or like a Lauryn Hill. And for the people who go out there and continuously try to push that forward, or at least give what they have to the game, you get nothing. If these numbers are official, Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre doing 34,000 the first week, I don't know what to say, man. Like, especially for a project like this, an album that was put together this well. I mean, I don't know what to say. It furthers that narrative of quote unquote retiring. And I don't think retiring from music is the answer if you still have something to give to music. But at the same time, I do think that with the growth of artists attempting to go out there and make new music, I think us as fans, we need to also grow and accept new music from our favorite artists. I can accept a new Raekwon album without thinking that it's going to make me feel like Only Built for Cuban Links did. Now, I know that's a tough thing to do. Like, it's a tough thing to go out there and say, you know what, I'm going to listen to one of my favorite artists' new music or new albums without any expectations of comparing it to the things that made me fall in love with this artist. But at the same time, man, like, you got to understand how difficult it probably is for them too to go back in the studio knowing that this is the catalog that they have. This is the music that they have that took them to this place, and not just trying to recreate it, but just trying to give that energy and trying to give, you know what I'm saying, that oomph. And I think that people like Black Thought have an extreme advantage in the fact that, yes, he gave us classic music with the Roots, but him teaming up with Danger Mouse is something new. Him not having the backing of the Roots is a new adventure. And honestly, when it came to the Roots, the spotlight was on the Roots as a collective and not just him as an individual MC. So he gets to go out there and jump out of the shadow of something that he was a big part of carrying the collective for in the first place. So yeah, Snoop and Dre, I'm not sitting here saying, Snoop and Dre need our quote unquote support, but I will say this. I don't think it's a good look when our biggest artists and our biggest stars go out there on the biggest stage and on the biggest platform and make music that was clearly put in play for a grandioso or big sound for it not to do numbers. And, you know, we could talk at nauseum about the lack of support that mainstream, I don't want to say radio, but whatever, say mainstream outlets that play music give to artists of a certain age. I mean, I get it. But as far as on a promotional level, I don't really know what else our OG artists could do, man, because Common, when he released his album with Pete Rock, he was on the Good Morning America. He was on Jennifer Hudson's show. LL Cool J was everywhere, literally everywhere, top to bottom. Gave a great interview with Charlemagne. Now, I will say this. I do think that the way that media covers artists now is not conducive to selling music. Now, I do think that that is a conversation to have. And no disrespect to Nori and Drink Champs. They do what they do. They have their own platform. Their platform is what it is. But their platform doesn't really sell music. And I don't know if there's a platform out there that actually does that. So when you have, a Snoop, a Dre getting on It Is What It Is, or getting on, Drink Champs or Entertainment Tonight even, I don't know if that translates to actually making people care about the music. And I think that's one of the things that, needs to be discovered in this moment. What is it that connects the artists and the music and the fans? I think these conversations that are happening on a podcast level and, when artists are trying to promote their new music on podcasts, I don't know if it makes people care about the music. I thought that Charlemagne's interview with LL Cool J was extremely interesting, and I thought he did an incredible job. But I don't know if he made people want to go get the music or anticipate hearing the music. And I think that the other part of that too, it's very difficult to get people that excited about new music from somebody that you've heard from all your life. Now, I always bring up Outkast because Outkast is one of those groups. I think Outkast, Missy Elliott, and a few others. They're always one of those groups that came out, and I was always like, yo, I can't wait to hear what they come up with next. And I think that when we have artists that are, this season and have been around the block so much, they have to do things out of the ordinary to actually get us to feel that way. I feel like LL did that when he teamed up with Q-Tip. I was speaking about that on this platform. I was like, I can't wait to hear what these guys are putting together because I don't know what this is even going to sound like. This could sound like a bunch of things. Now, I don't know if they articulated that to the best when they went and talked to people. Ill Magic with the super chat says, I rank LL's album over Snoop's album. I will say this, and we're going to talk about top 10 albums. I think that LL and Q-Tip on The Force, they took a lot of chances. And I think LL did a lot of things that I never heard LL do before on that album. He took on subject matter that I've never heard him take on. He took on flows that I've never heard him take on. But I think what is missing here, y'all know how I feel about Q-Tip. I think Q-Tip as a producer, in my personal opinion, nobody finds better loops than Q-Tip. Nobody is as innovative with with different, I don't want to say different sounds, but understands what the rhythms and the pocket is, like Q-Tip. But I will say this: I do think that Dr. Dre outproduced Q-Tip if we're comparing the two, and he did it in a power way. Now, if you want to give Q-Tip the abstract points, no pun intended, and the creative points, that's fine too. But the production job on Missionary is just so over the top. It would be difficult for me to just say that the Force is better than Missionary. And if we're talking about the mic performances from the two MCs, I think that they're very equal in that sense. I think that LL did his thing on the mic, and I think that Snoop did his thing as well. I think the features are placed better on Missionary. I think the songs are put together better on Missionary. And I would have to give Missionary the nod from beginning to end. Now, what LL and Q-Tip did on the Force, I mean, they over exceeded my expectations, to be perfectly honest with you. Both OGs did, actually. And yeah, I mean, that would be my reason. I would love to hear Magic's reason for why he puts the Force over Missionary. Now, I went back and listened to both albums. I went back and listened to all of these albums this weekend and today, and I put together my rankings. But yeah, man, I mean, again, I'm not sitting here crying because I think Missionary is this and that. I do think whether Missionary is whack or not, if you have Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre coming together and you're doing 36,000 units the first week, that just lets me know that that core audience didn't know that this was happening or didn't care that this was happening. And it's hard for me to believe that people from a certain generation just didn't even give a Snoop and Dr. Dre produced album a shot. Michael Williams with the super chat says, are we approaching a point where it will become difficult to rank Big over Kendrick, even just based on catalog size alone? Who's higher on your list? Well, if I'm being objective, here, times change, flows change, music evolve, people evolve. If I'm being objective here, Kendrick Lamar being ranked over Biggie Smalls, I mean, it's fair game. Me personally, I think Biggie's nicer. I think Biggie's the better MC top to bottom. I think Biggie has the better flow. I think Biggie is more versatile. Obviously, he has the better voice. I think Biggie made songs that Kendrick still can't make. But if I'm looking at this objectively and I'm talking to somebody that is of this generation or of the Kendrick generation, if you will, and they go down his catalog album for album, and they say that Biggie only has 2 albums, and they speak to Biggie's limited amount of work, they make a good case. I would disagree with the case, but there could definitely be a case made. Because I think that what hurts Biggie is that many people look at it, people who weren't there, they could look at his legacy and his catalog and say, yo, y'all are only acting like this because dude's no longer here. And he only made 2 albums. But when you look at Biggie's catalog, and again, if we do the whole versus format or whatnot, there's not anybody. It's very rare. It is a very limited few who want to go song for song with the Notorious B.I.G., even with his limited catalog. And if we talk about somebody who never sounded uncomfortable on the record, I mean, Biggie, man. Biggie, the only thing that you could get Biggie on and say that Kendrick got him on is the fact that Biggie never really got intellectual with you, but the man died at 25. He didn't really get a chance to. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, again, I'm not going to sit here and give points for something that never happened, but if we're being honest about it, and if, like I said, somebody of the Kendrick generation says, listen, man, we got Overly Dedicated, you got Section 80, you got Good Kid, Mad City, you got To Pimp a Butterfly, you got Damn, you got Mr. Morale, you got Chicken X. Damn, what else he got to do? I mean, look, you got me. But I know what I know. If I'm sitting here picking, in a vacuum and I'm picking the best MC here, I mean, to me, Biggie's the better MC than Kendrick. But if we're gonna go criteria for criteria, it'd be very tough for Biggie to beat Kendrick with just 2 albums with the output that Kendrick has had. Now, don't sit here and misquote me and say, "Hey, anybody with more than 2 albums beats Big." I'm not saying that. We do have to understand Kendrick Lamar has a Section 80 in his catalog. He has a Good Kid, Mad City in his catalog. He has a To Pimp a Butterfly in his catalog, and he has a Damn in his catalog. Those 4 mixed with Mr. Morale, GNX, and Overly Dedicated, and the impact of what he's become. I mean, it's tough. It is what it is. Black Wealth and Power says, Mike, were you ever able to revisit Magna Carta? I was able to revisit Magna Carta. I still didn't like it. I mean, Magna Carta for me, and you know what? I think Blueprint 3 on, Jay-Z is still trying to find that pocket. He's trying to find what's current. I think the beauty of what Jay did in his prime, he was able to seamlessly weave in and out of what was popping at the time. Like, he did that with Volume 2. He did that with Volume 3. He did that with the Dynasty and with the Blueprint. He kind of set his own template, if you will. Everybody started using soul samples after that, or at least a lot of people did. And then the Blueprint 2, he was able to kind of, run with that Philly style. And the Black Album, he took that to the next level. And then once he retired, I think he kind of, that's when he kind of start, I don't want to say chasing, but he's kind of start trying to find, okay, what are people into now? And then when American Gangster, he kind of went back into his own pocket. And then Blueprint 3, he sounds like he's chasing different styles. Holy Grail is no different. The song Holy Grail with him and Justin Timberlake is cringy. It's not a good song. It never was a good song. I mean, the sentiment of it's good, you know what I'm saying? Like the topic and all that is cool. But no, it's not a good song. It's just not. Mad Max in the super chat says, LOL, Biggie has records that stand strong after 30 years. Kendrick don't have 10 songs that we play in heavy rotation now. That may be true. That may be true. Kendrick's strength is in his catalog. Oh, let me see if Servan's ready to get on. Kendrick's strength is in his catalog. Now, granted, this is what I would ask you, Mad Max. What else does Kendrick have to do to surpass Biggie with Biggie's 2 albums? Black Wealth and Power, the super chat says, but was it as bad as you remember? Okay, it wasn't as bad as I remember, but it wasn't that good. I mean, I still think it might be Jay-Z's worst album. Mad Max in the super chat says, people remake Biggie songs. They sample his songs and his voice. No one does that for Kendrick. I mean, you haven't given it enough time. I do think at some point people are going to be sampling Kendrick's material. I do. It's hard to say that, that's not going to happen. Magna Carta might be Jay-Z's weakest album. Servan, was good, man. How you feeling?
Was good. I feel good. How y'all doing?
Good to see you, man.
Yes,
good
sir.
to see you. Yeah, they're getting on me about the Magna Carta take, but whatever. Let me ask you this, man. I do want to piggyback on what somebody was just talking about, man. Would you put Kendrick over Biggie all time?
Nah,
And
I don't like comparisons of that, because we can't ever give it a fair objective opinion on that, mainly just because we're gonna find like those legends like a Biggie or a Tupac to be so near and dear to us that we can't see anything being put up, above that. Even with Biggie having a less catalog of music than Pac, it's still kind of like for hip hop fans, it's still kind of like blasphemous to put anything over them. So I mean, I think we just have to appreciate that for the time period where it was. We're trying to make that comparison to today, where even album sales are not even the same in the streaming world or whatever. I just think that these are two eras that we can't compare, and these guys' careers are not over yet. So I think we still got more to go before we start making those type of statements.
So is LL Cool J over Biggie?
LL over Biggie?
Yeah.
Nah, I don't think their career paths could even be, compared. LL came in the 80s. Hip hop was measured differently. The standard of what you'll look at today's artists, or even further to Biggie's, to compare it to the era where LL came out, is not the same. I just feel like we can't really start doing these things with these lists and putting those type of things above each other, because things are a little bit different now with today's eyes and how stuff is looked at. Because like today, I feel like first week album sales means absolutely nothing. And the reason why I say that is because it's not a true testament to the impact of music when you're going off first week sales, and it's in a streaming era. So we already know that doesn't really do anything either. So like when we start talking numbers with this current day output of how music is consumed, I just think it's not a conversation that really holds much weight. Because if we look at the albums that we have on our top tens, some of those albums were doing 30 something in sales as well. I mean, Corday did 10. That's not a
Mm,
true test of how good that album was. So I just figure
yeah.
like the way music is measured today is just a hard comparison to compare it to things of the past. And also, for a lot of these artists, they still got more to go. Their career is not over. Unfortunately, like Big and Pac, their stuff was ended early. But because of that, there's too many factors why that comparison is going to be different.
It would be interesting to, it's kind of like, when you're playing like one of those, NBA lives or, 2K or whatever, where you're like throwing um, a player from the 70s or 80s in today's game. Like it would be interesting to see how well or not so well somebody like Pac or Big could do in today's era of streaming and having to come up with more and more content, and understanding that your quote unquote big songs aren't going to be as big in this era, because songs kind of just come and go in this era. Let me get to the super chats real quick. Jay Short says, Mad Max out here capping. People are going to be playing Humble, Not Like Us, All Right, and Don't Kill My Vibe for years to come. Personally, I rank Biggie higher than Kendrick, but being objective, yeah, no, straight up. Mad Max with the super chat says, Jay Short, you ain't named 10 songs, you named 5. And what black person's bumping Humble? You also said Dot didn't get what? Ingram Burn in Cali? He says that was your words. Who is capping now? All right. I will say this. If I'm being objective, if I look at LL's catalog and everything that LL brings to the table, has brought to the table, his impact, his versatility, and how he's been able to change from decade to decade to decade, I would have to objectively put him over Big. Now, Pac is a different conversation, because I feel like Pac has made songs that LL has yet to make. You know what I mean?
My
Um,
thing, I guess, what my question would be to you, Mike, like when we make
uh,
those type of statements, it would be, what is the criteria for what we're going based off of?
Well, the criteria I would say is catalog of music, longevity, stage presence, stage performance, rap voice, features, hit records. I think the
And those
only
are
area
exclusive
in
to
the
Tropical Flavor.
arena that Biggie beats LL in, I think that both of Biggie's albums are probably better than all of LL's albums. If we're talking albums. And bar for bar, I think Biggie's nicer than LL. No disrespect, I love LL. But if we're talking about impact, that's LL. If we're talking about performance, that's LL. If we're talking about longevity, that's LL. If we're talking about hit records, that's LL. And and if we're just I guess from criteria to criteria and point for point, I think that I would have to give the nod to LL. And I do think that Yeah, they said that the criteria that we made a few years ago was solid. We need to bring that back. It gets difficult, and I think that there's a gift and a curse to what Biggie did and how great Biggie was for that small period of time, and the fact that he didn't get to live to be greater, but he also didn't get to live long enough to possibly fall off. Now, do I think Biggie would have fell off? I don't think so. But we didn't get a chance to see that. And it's just, he might be the biggest question mark in hip hop. I know a lot of people say the DLC, but to me, I think it's Biggie. His ceiling was so high. We just don't know. Mad Max, I'm sorry,
Ooh.
Jay Short with Super Chat says Mad Max is correct. Nobody is really bumping Kendrick out here until this latest album. Now people are having a Kendrick reappreciation, and Mad Max can't name 5 West Coast songs. This is the New York and LA back and forth we got here. Rashawn Lane with the Super Chat says Dot is higher in overall criteria. I don't think Big is a better MC. I think that he's the best MC of all time. Dot is timeless, though let's not get disrespectful.
And see, the reason what, and this goes back to why I say these are things that when we're starting to go based off those things in the criteria, we can't really objectively measure because the stuff was untimely. Like Big's run was, wasn't as long. Of course, I mean, with LL even coming in the 80s, you know what I'm saying? Like he already had years on top of Biggie. And then it's not like Biggie's career ended because he fell off or his music wasn't bumping. It ended because his man was murdered. So it's
Right.
like trying to make those comparisons is just like it's kind of silly to me, man, because it's never going to be measured fairly because of their untimely demise.
Now, do
We
we
can talk.
punish somebody like a Jay-Z because Biggie died? I mean, Jay went out there and did more than Big did. You know what I'm saying? And do we sit there and say, you know what, Jay can never be better than Big, no matter what he does? And it's
Well,
like you gotta respect the work, you know?
even with that, here's the thing that makes sense for all three of those guys is they had the chance to be out around the same time. But
Yeah.
like I said, like we got to see what Jay had to offer when, when Biggie was alive. LL, he was alive around the same time. So, but still, the comparison of their careers because others was cut short. There's going to be a lot of wins that LL is just going to win by default. It's just like I just don't think they're fair comparisons because the career path and their untimely deaths. It's easy to put a lot of people on top of them because of those things.
You know, I've said this before. I think LL is the toughest rapper ever to rank. I mean, because he's so impactful, he's so polarizing, he's done it all. But the things that we hold the highest in hip hop, he's not dominant in that way. And that is mic performance, not to say he ain't that, but you know what I mean. And in classic album making. And that's because again, he comes from a different era of album making. Like the album structure from his era is you make hit songs, you make B-sides, you put them all on there. It's like I think The Force was the first time we actually saw LL make an album that had a theme and it flowed in this way. And so I think that's what makes him so difficult to rank because it's almost like every person that you're comparing LL to is almost apples and oranges because the way he approached music was so different than his peers. You know what I mean?
If we want to just keep it like just strictly to the music, that's something that I say, okay, we can go talk about longevity. That's one thing. But just the quality of music and the impact of the music, if we're just going to weigh it off that, then that's when we could have a conversation about it, in my opinion, because that's the only thing you could do is compare the music. We can't say album sales. We can't say longevity with them because, why those comparisons can't happen. So if we want to stick strictly to the impact of music in their time frame, then I guess that's what would be the better ranking for putting all three of those in comparison.
Michael Williams with the super chat says, I have Big over Kendrick. Just think it's an interesting discussion. Big's 2 classics versus Kendrick's catalog. Big being the nicer MC versus Dot's range and artistry. You can make a case for either, for sure. Yeah, I mentioned this last week, and I kind of want to follow up on this topic before we move on to the Fat Joe and Lord Jamar and Tariq thing. Big Boy was asked what is his go Outkast song, and he said Spodioti Dopalicious. I would like to ask you, and I've done some research in my own mind and in my own car playing all of Outkast's music to see if I could find my go Outkast song. Do you have a go Outkast song?
I have a few. Elevators is one of my joints.
You got to
Uh,
pick one. You got to pick one. Big Boy was able to pick one.
Cause they had a couple art of storytelling joints that I like. But
I
yeah, I
like
think uh, I would have to say elevators for me.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, I would have to say elevators because they have some classic ones to me, but like I don't know, man.
Elevators was a moment for me. I remember
I think
exactly where
elevator.
I was when I heard it. I remember, 96 was a great year for Atlanta, period. ATLians, they set that album up very well with Elevators. That's what I will give Outkast too.
Mhm.
Like when they dropped their first single, they got you really ready for the album. And Elevators really set the tone. It's funny. I think that the first song I heard on the Kuma I was Skewed on the Barbie. So that really set the tone for me. I'm a Wu-Tang fan and Dungeon fan. So when I heard Raekwon on there, I'm like, whoa, what's going on? But I do feel like Elevators was the one that really set the tone the best for an upcoming Outkast album. Now, I'm gonna say this, man. I was riding around, I was listening to some of my favorite Outkast songs. I have an answer. Benz or Beamer is my favorite Outkast song. That shit hits, man. Like the way that beat hits, the scratches, the way they're going back and forth, and you know what I'm saying, like the drums, like that shit is crazy. And I've always loved the song, and I think that it depends on what Outkast that you love, right? And I love all forms of Outkast, but when Andre and Big Boy were rapping, and you know what I'm saying, and doing their rapping thing back and forth, you can't beat that, man. And I don't feel like they did that enough, as crazy as that is to say. And I found it interesting that Big Boy picked a song that they're not even really rapping on as his
Yeah,
favorite
I
cast
would
song.
say that's interesting. That's one of my favorite Outkast joints. It's just the music of it, and then the
Yeah.
story music. But um, it was interesting that he had that as favorite, being that it's not they're not rapping on it. You know, that's
Yeah,
why
and how seriously they took rapping. You know what I mean? Like the way
yeah,
they
the music
approached
itself is
rapping. Yeah.
carries that record. You know, the music of that is just great. Just listening to the sonics. You know,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't have it as my number one because they're not spitting on there. You know, they're not rapping. You know, but the music of it, the way it's structured, like I really do like that joint, but I can't put that over something where these guys are rapping.
And it makes you think, like, do people rank Outkast as high as they do because of their rap skills or just because of the innovative, nature and the musicality and the originality? Because honestly, if we're being real about it, just bar for bar, they're tough. I don't think there's a duo that can out rap Outkast. That's just me.
I
Like,
mean, I think it's all of the ones that you said, all of the above. It was the
mhm,
how they were different. That even though they were from the South, they could still spit. You know what I'm saying? I don't think anybody could start hanging out, they're from the South stuff over their head too much because they've proven that they could just rap at a high level. Um, I I don't see how they're not in the conversation more than just the conversation of 3,000. You know, like
right.
people often, throw 3,000 in their top tens or top fives or whatever, but Outkast as a whole, as a group, I feel like are much greater than what either of them did solo wise.
Well, yeah. I mean, well, Andre has done nothing solo wise, right? Like, if you have Andre in your top whatever, like, are you just listening to Outkast songs and then cutting them off when Big Boy comes on or something? Because Big Boy got bars too, and I would think if you rank him that high, Big Boy has to be on your list too. Il Magic in the super chat says it is interesting to me to see how two albums are still held high over Dot's catalog. This is like how we rank Lauren's one album over a lot of catalogs. I agree with that too. But yeah, so Cass is like somebody. All right, I'll say this, man. I was talking to a guy who's not really a big hip hop fan, but a big music fan, right? And he's more so in the rock side of things. And he asked me, he was like, "What hip hop album? What is the best hip hop album or classic hip hop album that doesn't have any samples?" And I started thinking, and it was like all original music. Now, granted, I know there are some samples on like Southern Playalistic, but the first places I could go to were Outkast albums, because most of the classic albums I know, they do have, some other published works on there, as he put it. And I think that's one of the things that really puts Outkast ahead of their peers too musically. And I think that's what really helps Outkast get ranked over a lot of folks as well, because they're not just a hip hop duo. They're kind of like just a band in a sense, because I would say about 90% of the music they made was original. I mean, they sampled some, but not a lot.
There's
In
not
relation to their hip hop peers, especially in the 90s, you know what I mean?
there's not a classic you're gonna be able to find in hip hop without a sample. I mean, it's just kind of
Yeah,
starting from the
it's true.
foundation of hip hop is those samples. I mean, there's things that are sampled from records that people won't even recognize because some of
Right.
them only look at sampling from the vocal standpoint, just the music and the instrumental standpoint of sampling. You're gonna find that all over classic hip hop albums, and people don't even know. Like there was a lot of samples with a lot of albums that came out this year, and some of them may go over people's heads besides the obvious because they're probably familiar with like the original song. But like when you start breaking down instruments, like say for example on like Kendrick album, I think like they had like an Isaac Hayes sample or something like that. you know
Mhm.
um Unless you're a person that listens to that, a lot of people don't even know. Like I don't know any hip hop classics without at least a sample instrument wise, um or even parts of music sped up or whatever. I can't think of one album out here that doesn't have no samples.
Yeah.
That's classic.
Like I said, Outkast samples a lot. I mean, I listen, when you say a lot, I'm not gonna sit here and say their music is sample free. But in relation to their rap peers, I don't think they sample a lot. I mean, Love Tribe, a lot of samples, you know what I'm saying? Same thing with Daylight. And again, that's not a knock on anybody. Like the way people are able to freaking flip samples creatively adds to your artistry. I'm thinking the Chronic, Doggy Style, things like that. It's like, oh yeah, very sample heavy. But Southern Playalistic, I mean, somebody go out there and count the samples on that album. I mean, I'm sure there are some on there, but it seems like a lot of original works on there. But hey, who am I? Mall 7 with the super chat says Wu Tang Forever album didn't have a lot of samples on it. Okay. I need to go back and look at that. Okay, so let's go on to the next thing real quick.
Sure.
We ain't gonna be on here like super, super long tonight. But how do I start this? Okay, Fat Joe goes on Math Hoffa's podcast, and he's there promoting his album, and they get on the topic of, I guess, Black Americans, and Fat Joe goes on the tirade calling, FBA, for the people out there who don't know, Foundational Black Americans, a hate group. And this is all in conversation about the origins of hip hop and the fact that Fat Joe started this narrative. I want to say he was on the Breakfast Club and said that hip hop was started by Puerto Ricans and blacks 50-50. And that set off a hellstorm out there in the social media world, to the point where documentaries have been made debunking this notion that Puerto Ricans had, half of credit of creating hip hop. Um, Lord Jamar has gone on his platform because, Fat Joe also spoke ill of Lord Jamar on Math Hoffa. He basically called him the weakest person out of Brand Nubian, and basically called him crazy and this and that. And Math Hoffa has taken down the interview, I guess, due to the reaction that has been going on from it. But I'm gonna give my take on all of this. What you want me to go first, or you want to go?
Yeah, you can get it off. You rock out.
All right, Jay Short with the super chat says, you should have asked your friends. I'm sorry, you should have asked your friend name an Elvis Presley or Pat Boone song without a quote unquote sample. That's a good one. That is a good one. Ill Magic with the super chat says, one song with Outkast and Clips. Who do y'all think is gonna have the best verses? That's a good one. I think that Andre's gonna have the best verse. Then I think it could be Pusha. And then it'll be Big Boy and then Malice, in my opinion.
Malice is real nicer than, I know it's hard to kind of think about Malice.
All of them are nice.
It's the clicks out, but Malice, I think he sort of always had those upper verses to me compared to Pusha.
I think I think once Hell Have No Fury came, Pusha got better than Malice. But yeah, on the first album, Malice was better. MC, I think. Okay, well let me start. Let me start this. I'll say this, man. You gotta have evidence, and you gotta show and prove. And I think the days of artists, big time people who quote unquote feel like they have influence, just saying things without actually backing it and having proof behind it, those days are over. The days of somebody getting on MTV and just telling you, like, yo, this is how it started, this is who started it, blah, 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 and you just believe it for what it is because that person's on television. Those days are over, man. If you want to solidify what you're saying, the hip hop was started 50-50 by Puerto Ricans and Black Americans, you can go out there and do what Tariq Nasheed did. And where's your documentary, Fat Joe? Put together a documentary. If what is being said out here is untrue, and the people who are saying these things are saying this from a hateful place and not a factual place, as a hip hop scholar yourself, and as somebody who is ingratiated in the culture in that way, go out there and make your own documentary. Put together these people that you say were impactful in that way, and show everybody, like, look, this is what I'm talking about. And I don't understand why it's approached in a way like it's coming from a place of malice. When you have actual people who are still alive, like Trixie, the first breakdancer, Cornbread, the first graffiti artist, you got people like Coke LaRock, you got people like Melly Mel, you got the first female MC, Shallow Rock, and you got all of these people saying the same thing, and the people that grew up around them saying these same things. Why are these people getting ignored? And that's the part that looks weird. And the fact that you have people like Disco King Mario that has to be brought to the forefront by some of the OGs that never get light either. Like, why does it even take all of that? And why are people mad that these people who clearly were a part of the origins of this genre? I don't understand why there's no meeting in the middle. And I don't understand why it's being approached from Fat Joe's standpoint in a divisive, defensive way. Obviously isn't correct. And again, you also have to respect the fact that you're just not old enough, Fat Joe. You're not. Like, that's literally like me sitting here telling some niggas who are a part of Atlanta's music scene in the 80s that they don't know what they're talking about. I'm not old enough. I wasn't outside in 1984 in Atlanta. I wasn't. And, and the fact that you won't even acknowledge the fact that, you know what, that person might be right because I was born in 72 or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just don't understand that part of it. And I think that the way that Joe is approaching this and has approached this turns people off. It's indicative of his personality and how he's even approached the N-word. again, if that's, you know what I'm saying, how you get down in your neighborhood, this and that and the third, that's cool. But the fact that you just get defensive when people sit there and say they don't like you saying that, I mean, shit, Kendrick said that he don't like Drake saying the N word. Drake doesn't identify as white like Fat Joe does. So, I mean, why can't you just understand where people are coming from and meet people in the middle somewhere? And I think that the way that Joe approaches these things, it will be to his detriment. And I think it already has been. And it comes across as a colonizer to a certain extent. And to sit there and label a lineage a hate group is dangerous language. It just is. You know what I'm saying? Like that's unnecessary, uncalled for. If you want to disprove what somebody has said, or what I mean, they have a whole documentary out there. You could look at that documentary and break it down. Break down what's wrong. Make your own documentary if you want to. You know what I'm saying? Like, but just going back and forth on the internet and just trying to clown people and call people crazy and all that, that's some colonizer shit. It is what it is.
I'm gonna keep it a buck on this one, man. Like Fat Joe was wrong because we know where it derived from, but we do have to take in consideration that Hispanics did contribute to the beginning of hip hops, the b-boying and stuff like that. But to say that they're the ones who created it, that's not a factual statement. But did they contribute to the early stages of hip hop? Then yeah, that's where that starts to come into conversation. I think so both of them are wrong. And I feel like Fat Joe is wrong in a statement made, but I also feel the ones that are criticizing what he say are hypocrites as well. Because they is when it's a time for them to come out and speak towards something, because I guess that's a topic of the whatever, then they'll pop their neck out and say stuff. But when you're really listening to their platform and certain things that they say, aside from this, they're very divisive in some of their language and some of the things that they do. I mean, I can't take I can't take these guys that's criticizing Fat Joe seriously because I've seen how you guys are divisive wise. These are the same guys that's also pro black and pro whatever, but when Kamala was running, the stuff that they said about her was very disrespectful outside of just what your views are politically. They said a lot of disparaging things to the point where one of them had to go apologize for it. And I'm like, how can you say you're pro-black and then you do stuff like that? So I feel like things that they say is hypocritical, and I feel like they're part of these internet characters. You have Lord Jamar, you have Dr. Umar, you have Jaguar Wright. I feel like all of them gets put in that same jar to me because I feel like to an ignorant person, what they're saying makes a lot of sense. But I say you could put some truth in stuff, but if the majority of what you say is BS and you sprinkle a little bit facts on it, it doesn't mean that's still not BS. Like those guys are ignorant in what they do. As far as Fat Joe, does he have the voice to be able to speak about hip hop stuff? Yes, he did come up within hip hop. That doesn't mean everything that he's saying is factual. This is factual. But I do believe that he has a right to be within hip hop, just like any other rapper that came up during that era and been in it. I think they could have the conversation, but when you start making statements like, your people is the ones who created this, and that's where you deserve to get that pushback. But I think he's just as much as ingrained in the culture as any other MC, being that they were in the neighborhoods, they were the ones that lived and was a part of that culture. He can have the conversation. It just doesn't mean he's all the way right. And that's where it stops there.
My bad. Rashawn with the super chat says FBA's is Tariq Nasheed's organization. 95% of Black Americans don't identify with that. Tariq is a scammer, in my opinion. That's just me. All right. Let me say this, and I tune into much of the new Black media's content, and follow the whole foundational Black American movement. Even interviewed Tariq Nasheed, man. Good brother, good that he actually did the interview and hopefully do more. But what I do want to clear this up. I do think that when Black Americans show pride in themselves and in their lineage and have to delineate, because unfortunately we don't really get the credit for what we do. We kind of just get the baggage of everybody. When Black people globally mess up, it it gets put on us that we're being divisive, right? It's like, okay, when, let's just say, Jamaica wins, what I'm saying, at the Olympics, we applaud that or whatever, you know what I'm saying? But if we go out there and, do something that is proudful and, shows pride to just foundational Black Americans or Black Americans, for whatever, people look at that as us separating ourselves from everyone else. And that's not what it is. It's just being able to be proud of our individual lineage, just like Jamaicans should be proud of their own individual lineage. That's not saying that we don't collectively make up a Black populace, but don't just sit here and say, when the bad shit goes down, we all Black, but whenever something good happens, then, Haiti pride, Jamaica pride, you know what I mean? And some people obviously are going to take things and run with it and make them divisive, but it shouldn't be a divisive thing to just acknowledge what a person has done, give them props. And again, we're talking about a lineage that has had many things stolen from them, everything stolen from them. So yeah, we're going to be a little bit protective on some things that look like they might be slipping away. Like when we got blues taken from us, we got jazz taken from us, we got rock and roll taken from us. And when we know that hip hop was started from us, and even, and shout out to Kool Herc coming in from Jamaica doing what he did, we know that the records that he were playing were Black American records. You know what I'm saying? And the parties were, a whole Black American vibe, and that's cool. But when you have somebody coming in that has a big voice and a big platform like a Fat Joe and says that it was created by Blacks and Puerto Ricans 50-50, it takes us back to that place where things were getting ripped from us. You know what I mean? And it's a sensitive thing.
But this is
I
the
think
thing.
before we never really had a voice to even debunk any of those things, and those things just got taken from us,
But you know what? This is the thing that bothers me, though. This is a conversation for hip hop. Those guys have another agenda why they're going against Joe, and this is a perfect time to kind of use this as the target to push whatever narrative they are. I want to see this conversation placed in hip hop figures that have all contributed to the culture. Those other guys are just trying to find a point that's already divisive within his own and push whatever agenda that they're going to push. So I can't take what these guys are saying seriously, even if some of the things that they're saying have some truth in it, because I know that they mix a lot of bullshit within truths for whatever who want to follow their stuff. Let's have this conversation amongst hip hop heads. We, like I said, our stuff is not that old that this can't be dated back to the originations of it, to the real world.
Exactly. And that's why I give Tariq props, because what he did was he didn't go out there and just get a bunch of talking heads. He went out there and got the pioneers from New York, from the Bronx, and they sat down for his documentary. And I think that that's how you're supposed to do it. And if you want to have an opposing documentary, just like, any other historical figure, go out there and do that. You know what I'm saying? And have some other people who are telling that part of it, because we got to ask ourselves. Go ahead.
I just don't think those are the guys that I'm going to take my information from. You know what I'm saying? And the reason why I say that, because I know the agenda to a lot of their rhetoric. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like this is a hip hop conversation. These guys, the stuff that they're saying has been divisive amongst our own people. So those are not the people I want to have the conversation about this. Let's have, if this is really hip hop, let's keep that hip hop with hip hop figures, because what they're doing is on some other shit. Because that's turning this conversation into something that's outside of hip hop. That is not really, I think, Joe's intention of that going ugly wise. So
I gotta, like how you're questioning other people's intentions, I question Joe's intentions based on his approach. You know what I'm saying? Because again, I don't understand why Joe is not able to meet people in the middle. I don't understand why Joe's not able to sit down with other pioneers as well. I'm talking about the pioneers. I'm not talking about anybody outside of hip hop or whatever.
I was gonna say, I don't see Joe not wanting to have the conversation with those individuals. And this is not even defending him. This guy is a guy who I genuinely think loves the culture of hip hop. That's one thing I can't take away from him. You know what I'm saying? I think he really does, but I can't see him turning down those conversations with those older heads if he's wrong. You know, I think that he's looking at it like how I said, how Hispanics and other people of the neighborhood contributed to hip hop. I think in his mind, he thinks that contribution means that it was created by them more so than the contribution. And it's just something that is just, he's wrong about in that part of it. But it's like, to take away his credibility or his place in hip hop or the things he should speak on, I think that's bullshit.
Black Wealth and Power with the super chat says, are we really going to act like Hispanics haven't had the N-word in their mouths for a long time? Why are we mad now? Joe criticized FBA internet group. Well, I mean, there's a lot of things to change. You know what I mean? Like, I think for a long time, you know, as it pertains to the LGBTQ community, you could say the F word, you know, freely, even in music. People can't do that anymore. So, I mean, you know, things change. And not to say what's right, what's wrong, but at the end of the day, if a group comes to me that I'm not a part of and tells me that they're offended by how I'm approaching something
So,
that is sensitive to them,
who are these people that said that?
All right, let's just say let's just say that I grew up around Asian folks and I talk to Asian people a certain way or whatever, and then I become a global star and I keep saying these things on wax to a global audience of Asian people. If Asian people come to me and say that they feel a way about me saying this word or this term, all I can do is respect it if I really got love for that group of people and say, you know what, I'm just not going to use that anymore.
I'm sorry, I don't know who these group of people are. Like, I don't hear people saying this stuff. Like, who are these people? That's what I want to know. Who are these people that are so against Joe? I mean, I think Joe is in this place where he puts like, who are these people? You know what I'm saying? I don't think it was ever a thing when people ever questioned if Joe's able to say nigga, if Nori's able to say nigga, if Pun's able to say nigga. I don't think that was a part of this conversation. You know what I'm saying?
It has become
this internet era. This is what it is. It's a bunch of.
So can Drake say it?
You said what?
Can Drake say it?
We never was saying that he can't say it because you know we can't police the N-word. If that's something you want to like, people want to die on the hill on, have at it. But that's something it's not a hill I'm willing to die on. But at the end of the day, when Kendrick said what he said about Drake, it wasn't due to the way that they're trying to say stuff about Joe. It was really due to the fact that he says it a lot. Like, for a mixed guy, you're saying this word in a crazy way because they have the YouTubes where he's saying it with the hard R. It sounds goofy. You know what I'm saying? But other than that, we can't police that word, bro. You know how many people say stuff in rooms amongst people, and what are you gonna do? You gonna go over there and tell them to stop saying it?
I think, and I'm not trying to be funny, man. Like, I'm not trying to be funny, man. But at this age, I think Joe too old to be out here just saying nigga this, nigga that like that anyway. Like, you know what I mean? Even listening to Missionary. No, I'm just saying, like, listen to
you're in a room with a group of white folks and all of them are just throwing the N-word around. You about to go hold it down?
Of course.
But a lot of people say they do.
In that situation, that lets you know what they think of you if you're willing to, if they're going to go out there and say that around you in that way. I feel like, man, at this point, with everything that people have said and people hear and how over the top Joe goes with it, it's almost like he's saying it just be like, you know what, I could say it and what?
No, I mean,
it's not even, it don't even come across natural like that. You know what I mean?
Is doing a number on making people like passing narratives to make people seem a certain way. You know, and I don't like that because although Joe is not black, Joe is just as part of the culture as anyone else, man, because he came from his neighborhood. Like he grew up amongst all of this, man. Like we're gonna say he's not welcome into the culture. We're gonna try to police that. I don't think so.
Let's break that down a little bit. When we look at, and I remember this even growing up, man, like I was a big fan of Terror Squad. You know what I'm saying? But when I look at Terror Squad and the people that Joe put on, all of those guys look the same. They don't look like me. They never did. They look like DJ Khaled. They look like Tony Sunshine. They look like Cuban Link. And I respect it. It's cool. You do for your people, as you should. But let's not sit here, you know what I'm saying, decades and decades in and cap like he was out here putting niggas on like that. It just wasn't like that. He was putting his people on, which was cool. You know what I mean? They needed that, and they needed that voice at that time. But he wasn't putting black artists on like that. He never was.
But this is what I'm trying to figure out. Where is the conversation coming from? Is it now people are starting to feel he doesn't have a place in the culture now?
I think that it's kind of like the Eminem thing. I think that after time has gone on, people sat there and digested this and it's like, you know what?
Oh, you selective outreach.
Mad Max with his $20 super chat showing love. He says, Mike, respectfully, black people across the globe have had their history stolen, not just black Americans, of course. Do you understand the damage that the Caucasian man has done to Africa, mixing tribes, destroying their culture, etc.? I do understand that, but at the same time, that's why I think black Americans are very defensive in these moments where they feel like, you know what, somebody's trying to pull a slick one on us. Mad Max in the super chat says black people across the globe have all their histories lost. Some have just regrouped better than others, for sure. Yeah, and we're watching people try to remix history right in front of our eyes.
Man, you know, I hate conversations like this, man, because I feel like it's just pick and choose like who they want to hate at this moment. When like we've sat back and been our biggest enemies to our own culture as well. You know what I'm saying? Like the stuff that we do as an in culture is just as divisive and just as dangerous towards each other than the shit that we try to criticize and fake care about. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, we're saying that Joe is to be kicked out of the culture. Okay, if that's what people want to go do, whatever. But let's think about some hundreds of other people we let within the culture that didn't grow up around it, used it, pimped it, and got up out of it when they started being looked at a certain way. And people just still let them fly. But Joe is the person that we're gonna put on the board now as the target. We have so many others that be welcome to hip hop, used hip hop, and got the fuck out of it when the media was beating them down too much on it. And
I agree with that.
Just been welcome. Like it's just kind of hypocritical to me.
I just think that, you know, Joe doesn't make himself an easy person to like in these situations. I think his approach is all off. I think if you're going to make a statement to say blacks and Puerto Ricans created hip hop 50-50, you're either going to have to A, prove that, or you're going to have to B, retract that. And continuously doubling down on something that you're not willing to prove just doesn't work. It comes across as it's true because I said so. You know what I'm saying? And I don't think that works anymore. And I don't think that works in anything anymore. I mean, ask politicians out there. It just doesn't. And I think that what would serve Joe best right now is if he, you know, didn't make this about, you know, any internet groups and blah, blah, blah. Let's just address what you said. And are you able to prove that Puerto Ricans and blacks made hip hop or created hip hop 50-50? Or are you willing to concede to the fact that you maybe misspoke? That's it. And I think that for a lot of people, it's very difficult for them to just sit there and say that they were fucking wrong. Just that's it.
Yeah, I mean that's really what it is. Just say you're wrong.
Trying to make this digging himself this deeper hole because, like you said, regardless of what other people's agendas are, if they have facts on their side and you're continuously fighting facts with no other proof, you're gonna continuously look even more crazy.
I mean, it's not like what he said is so crazy, bro. There's a little bit of truth. Like I said, the contributions are there, you know, but
contributing like, and creating are two different things.
Created this 50-50. I don't think that's a true statement. So, you know, if that's what you want to stand on or whatever, or if you want to retract, that's cool. But it being turned into this other thing when people like starting to question this place in the culture and stuff like that, it's like, oh, you guys want to police the culture, but you guys are the same people that allow snitching to be a thing of today and all the other crazy stuff you guys let pass. I'm like, man, trying to police this culture, you'll be doing yourself more of a headache than whatever, because it's so once money got involved, that's when we couldn't start gatekeeping it. You know what I'm saying? Our been pimped 10 times over.
I mean, listen, I liked Fat Joe, and like I said, Terror Squad, Don Cartagena was kind of my real introduction to Fat Joe. And I thought that Fat Joe put together some dope beats. He was able to change with the times. He could, you know what I'm saying, he could give you some bars that were dope enough that, you know what I'm saying, the song was dope, and put together albums and things of that nature. And, you know, he was able to sign a pretty dope collective as well. Everybody on Terror Squad could spit for the most part. Armageddon was dope. Cuban Link was dope. These guys could rhyme. Pun could rhyme. And, you know, Pun found Remy, all that stuff. But I don't really know where Joe made this turn to become some sort of KRS hip hop authority type of figure. I guess, you know, again, for me, it was always like, you know, Fat Joe the Gangster, you know, Fat Don Cartagena and all of that. And so when you start to become that whole teacher, that historian thing, yeah, you're gonna have to have some sort of evidence. You can't just say I'm from the Bronx, so everything I'm saying about hip hop's creation is true, because there are a lot of other people from the Bronx who disagree with you, and you know, and you just gotta acknowledge that. And again, like I said, just acknowledge that you're not old enough. You're just not old enough to be able to tell that part of the history accurately. And I think that's the honest thing.
Right. I just
You know
think
what I
like
mean?
you wrong, say you wrong, and keep it moving for that. I mean,
Yeah.
like everybody that's a part of the culture have their right to speak on it. It's that
Yeah.
simple. It doesn't mean that everything that people say is right. I see a lot of people and notable figures in hip hop get on these podcasts and say a lot of stupid shit or stuff that's just not true. But you know, like I said, if you say you're wrong and just move it from there, and then say, well, okay, you know, if we were my, you know, some lineage of my people were involved in the contributions to hip hop, then I think that's more appropriate. So
Exactly.
I just think this is like the thing that people fake care about right now, man. Because really, like I said, if this is the time we want to start policing the culture, wow, man, let's hope we keep that across all boards, because we let a lot
Well,
of
we got to.
culture that's not
We
supposed to be in it.
we got to, because a lie unchecked becomes the truth. And we've seen that throughout history, you know? And I think even if you want to talk about Eminem and our late reaction with him, listen, I've always said that he was overrated. And I think that, you know, and I'm gonna give Lord Jamar props for this too. He's kind of the person that started the whole wave online where people started to think about, yo, do I really bump his music like that? Is he really as high as people say he is? And he wasn't afraid to say that. And I think that people start really thinking about that. It was like, well, it ain't really like that. And I think that a
Man,
lot of media narratives,
Lord Jamar is a sucker. I'm gonna be honest with you. He is. That shit.
no,
Yes,
I
yes, yes.
disagree.
Lord Jamar is a sucker, bro. This is the same guy that was just on that was having Vlad use him to get whatever he gonna say about our people from there until it became a disagreement about whatever in Farrakhan, and now you know he's not being on Vlad stuff. Like we've seen videos. This is the same guy who disrespect our notable people we put above everybody, like Biggie. You know what I'm saying? He's done stuff like that,
You
and like
disrespect
this,
Nicki?
yeah, he disrespected Biggie because he started talking about his gay lines within music and stuff like that, and try to paint this
Those
narrative.
lines were weird. Those lines were
Yeah,
kind of
but those
weird.
also lines of that time. But then to try to like wear smoke type fire and insinuate certain things, like man, look, people can have their opinions, but there's a lot of bullshit that's being said, and Lord Jamar is a hypocrite, bro.
How is
He's
Lord Jamar a hypocrite? I
he's a
disagree with.
he's a major hypocrite. His stuff is on YouTube, bro. Like you could go back and look at.
I listen to what Lord Jamar got to
He's
say.
just as divisive as anybody else who's willing to be divisive within the culture, man. I just feel like these guys get on these podcasts and they say certain shit, and it's all for engagement. You know what I'm
I
saying?
think
Like,
Lord Jamar is
can't take
somebody
it
that,
serious.
you know, I think Lord Jamar is somebody that has a strong opinion. Again, strong, a New
Even when he's
Yorker with a
wrong.
strong opinion. I think that, again, I give him credit for saying what a lot of people probably thought as it pertains to Eminem, and said something that nobody would say at the time. And you know, and it was what it was. Again, that's his opinion. And if his some of the things that he's saying in his opinion kind of resonate with certain
Lord
people
Jamar's
because
a
they're
hypocrite,
kind
bro.
of thinking that. I mean, it is what it is.
Lord
Um,
Jamar's a hypocrite, bro.
I don't see how he's a hypocrite. I disagree with that.
I stand by that. I'm telling you, these guys are characters to me. Like when you really look at their stuff, there's never consistent on what side they stand on, bro. It's like the actions and the words are never reflective of each other. Like I said, this guy is the same guy who split from Vlad to stand up for certain things, and then you go do what you was criticizing that or whatever your issue was with Vlad. You know what I'm saying?
What do you mean?
All right, say it like this. If you're gonna be this pro black guy and that's what you stand up for, cool, but stay with that, stay consistently on that, because you also have utilized these platforms to talk shit about your fellow brothers or whatever you claim to be as well. You know what I'm saying? Like your words and other things and how you speak about stuff within the culture is just as divisive as the things that you're calling out. Is so hypocritical, man. I've seen interviews where he just said certain things that are just not true, or the things that he say is just as bad as anything he was preaching on. These guys are characters, bro.
I would love to interview our brother Lord Jamar and I guess clear up any misnomers that may have been put out there because I don't see what you're saying. Like I don't see the hypocrisies. I think that he has strong opinions that and again I think you deal with this in the internet anyway, where it's like you're gonna ask certain people as an interviewer, especially Vlad, you're gonna ask a person who just says what they say some things that are gonna get explosive, and and I think they kind of play into that. But I never really seen Lord Jamar really flop on too much. I think that his stance on Eminem and his stance on this Fat Joe thing. I mean, it seems pretty consistent with who Lord Jamar is. I never seen him kind of running behind anybody, kissing up or anything. Now, granted, I will say this: there is there's a conflict of interest when it comes to what Vlad's platform is about and what Lord Jamar is about as a man knowledge of self and things of that nature. But you know I guess we also got to keep it real. A lot of people out here wouldn't have even heard Lord Jamar's opinion if it wasn't for Vlad's platform. Now you can kind of take that with a grain of salt, but I think it was kind of business. They worked together to
See,
to
figures like
further
him,
go ahead.
figures like him to me, I feel like is people that are now leeching on to a newfound fame. They already had this stuff for what they did for music, but this resurgence of now people actually want to give a damn about your opinions gets to get the best out of them. They started off doing interviews and was keeping stuff very solid, and then when they start gaining ground, they get on these podcasts and they say a lot of ridiculous shit. Lord Jamar is a guy to me who is a hypocrite. I
I
think a
don't
lot
see
of
what he
things
said that's so ridiculous though. But like somebody in the chat said, he is the East Coast. He's the East Coast Big Gift. Um, let's see. Jermaine Johnson with the super chat says, "Crack is more hip hop than 90% of rappers, and he's overqualified to express his point of view of the culture, even if we disagree with some of it. Point of view is cool, but when you're actually stating things that could be historical document, you either have to prove that or you don't. I mean, or you either can prove that or you cannot. You know what I mean? That's like me literally sitting here telling you guys, man, there were 3 Atlanta rap albums in the 90s that got 5 mics. You either got to prove that, like that's either true or it isn't. You know what I'm saying? And to sit there and say 50-50 it was created, it's either true or it's not. And I don't think people are out of bounds for challenging it. And I think that it says a lot about the individual that they feel infuriated that it's being challenged as opposed to actually proving it. But we could be talking in circles with this one, man.
These niggas are characters, dog. These are false prophets.
I
I'm telling
agree.
you, these niggas are characters.
I think Fat Joe could fall in that too.
Just because you sprinkle a little bit of truth within bullshit, don't make it all the way right.
But
These
what
guys are
happens when none of it's true, though?
a lot of these guys are characters, man. Like I said, I think a lot of that stuff started off as being genuine and being cool. And I think once that new thing of popularity started going around in a way that you could, use your words to push certain narratives and have certain following, I think that's where certain things get a little bit shaky with those type of figures, man.
Well, like Lord Jamar said, if Black Americans were to, not listen to Fat Joe's new material, and in the Puerto Rican population go listen to it or go support it, numbers wise, what does that look like? And I think that from what he's saying is the fact that Fat Joe did get to where he is right now from a lot of Black American support, and he's got to respect that. And I think that a lot of people feel disrespected by some of Joe's takes. And again, I have no problem with him putting his people first. I mean, you should. I mean, it's clear with how he was signing artists, the people that he was signing, who he was, looking out for mostly. But at the same time, when it comes to this rap thing and when it comes to this hip hop from a structural standpoint, and even from the support that you received as an artist, you got to respect, the Black fans. You just do. Zuri Fraser with the super chat says, F Fat Joe, he's not even a top 50 New York rapper. There it is.
This is not a fight I'm willing to fight, bro. It's like, if he was wrong, he was wrong, man. Like, we know he's not right, he's wrong, but it's like, I'm not about to be with the fake outrage today, dog. Like,
now, he might be top 50 in New York, but he's not top 50 all time, for sure.
Yeah, man. Some things.
Jay Shore with the super chat says, we don't have to accept lies to unify with people. Part of strengthening culture is being divisive, cleaning house, and separating people who don't serve our interests. It's a new day. That's the mentality. Saw your list. Top 10 hip hop albums of 2024. Let me get to this list real quick. Because my list is, I don't know if I'm going to put it on the screen.
I had on mine.
Huh? Oh, yeah. Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see. Let me, I want to get the image real quick. Oh, we got a whole countdown here. Let's see. I want to see your list real quick, and then, and I want to speak to mine. Dang. You got your list pulled up, Savon? Oh, I think I found it.
Yeah, I got mine.
All right, yeah. I got mine here, but I want to see yours real quick and just kind of go through this.
You want me to list them out?
Yeah, go for it while I'm looking for it on my end.
All right, number 1, it was Kendrick Lamar, Giannettes. Number 2, Corday Crossroads. Number 3, Schoolboy Q, Blue Lips. Number 4, Tyler the Creator, Chromacopia. Number 5, Glorilla Glorious. Number 6, Common and Pete Rock, The Auditorium, Volume 1. Number 7, Doechii, Alligator Bites Never Heal. Number 8, Freddie Gibbs, You Only Die Once. Number 9, Big X The Plug, Take Care. And number 10, Snoop, Missionary.
Okay. All right, let me start at number 10 for me. Number 10. Well, you know what? I had the honorable mentions. I had Shay Noir's Lotus Child, The Lotus Child. And I also had Master Ace's Richmond Hill. I thought Richmond Hill was a very, very dope project. Happened very early in the year. It's always difficult for those albums that, come early in the year. And I do understand when people talk about album of the years being named that came out in December. It is unfair to the stuff that came out earlier in the year that had to, contest with everything that happened in the year. I will say this about both projects. Shout out to Shay. She produced everything, I think, except for one track on there. She did her thing. Same thing with Master Ace. Richmond Hill, it sounds very vintage. Um, it's a clear, concise, dope album that sounds as good as, and this is not a diss, sounds as good as anything that would have come out in the album era of 2002, 2003. And it's what you want in your favorite MC that could go out there and give you a quality album that is the quality level of something that they made 20 years ago. Um, I said this when the album dropped. It's it feels conflicting to put something as album of the year in 2024 that sounds like it could have been made in like '03. And I say that, respectfully. And that's no knock on the album at all. It's just I wanted to hear what next year sounds like. You know what I mean? To put a
Well,
stamp. Huh?
fourth quarter drops always get kind of tricky because you're gonna compare it to everything else that dropped earlier in the year. I think people
Yeah.
do it consciously as well, but I mean, it panned out to be a somewhat solid year in hip hop because of fourth quarter drops.
Oh
But
yeah.
like this was not a strong year at all.
Well, I'm looking at the list. I think this is a strong list, but I understand what you're saying. Like, it's no
It wasn't
runaway.
amazing. It was solid, you know.
Yeah, it's very even kill here. Like any of these tens can kind of be interchanged. You know what I mean? All right, so this is what I got at number 10. I got Killer Mike's song for Sinners and Saints. I think the Killer Mike delivered. Honestly, to me, this album has more power and staying power, in my opinion, than the Michael album did. It had more soul to it than the Michael album did. I think that he really came through on this, and I think this is one of his best efforts, if not his best effort. I think the Michael album clearly sounds like it was made over a course of time, and I think he said that. But this album is just raw. I think the production is just way better on this album. And again, I know I always probably sound like I'm shitting on No ID. I know I do, but maybe I'm just not a No ID fan when it comes to production because, again, No ID produced Michael, No ID produced 444, and production's my big gripes with both of those projects. And number 9, I got Rhapsody. Please Don't Cry. Rhapsody's so consistent when it comes to putting together albums, man. And I think that this is one of those projects that doesn't get talked about enough. It's not Eve, but it's not too far from that either. And I love the fact that Rhapsody gets her love, but it seems like she gets love for who she is in her approach. But when the music gets delivered, it doesn't get that same fanfare for the same people. And I hate to see somebody continuously, get put in the quote unquote slept on category. I think that she's better than that. I think this album proved that. And yeah, Rhapsody deserves to be on this list. Number 8, I got LL Cool J, The Force. Like I said, it exceeded expectations for me. I think that LL, came through doing some things that I've never heard him do on the mic. He took a chance with working with Q-Tip. And I give kudos to Q-Tip for actually releasing the album. That normally doesn't happen. And it was also futuristic shit too. I wish that they would, like you said, do this as a series. I
Yeah,
wish they
that's
kept
what I want.
punching. I think that there's even some gems on here that I wish they would have kept punching on. I think that is, and I would imagine LL Cool J is a very busy man. I would imagine his day to day is crazy, but I wish we could have got more and more videos and more visuals, if you will, or performances or something to go along with these records, because I think that what this album has that a lot of other albums in this time period don't have it has this eclectic depth to it where I think that it could really present some very interesting visuals. And I'm not even just talking about music videos, but just pieces. And I think there's so much that could be done with a lot of these things. And I wish that they would just have kept plugging on with that. And you never know what would catch. I mean, you remember when JID put out that what's that song that he did that caught with 21 Savage or whatever? And it caught like maybe like a year or two after it was a single.
Sound?
Huh? Was
Was
it around? Yeah,
it
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it became a TikTok challenge and all that stuff. I think that, you keep plugging, you just never know. All right. Number 7, I got Dolce, Alligator Bites Never Heal. I mean, this is a breakthrough effort for Dolce. I think it's a very dope effort. Obviously, she's getting the fanfare for it. Very creative artist, very talented artist, and she's showing what she can do. And this is her year in many aspects, in many regards. I think a lot of people feel the same way about Glorilla. I just from a contextual standpoint and just from a skill set standpoint, I don't put those two on the same level. And I think for me, those things kind of come into consideration when we're talking about ranking things. Now, it's different being hot than actually coming with something that, is going to be hot 2, 3, 4 years from now. I have no question in my mind that this is going to age extremely well. All right, and where am I at? 10, all right, number 6, I got Tyler. What is it? Chromopedia?
Pharmacopoeia?
Chromacopia. Tyler's been extremely consistent, and he's been consistent in his production approach. He's been consistent in his collaborations, and it's one of those albums that is a breath of fresh air. It's every time he drops, it's like that. He makes everybody better when they work with him. He can do it on his own. He makes albums. He makes anthems. He makes album songs. He keeps you guessing, like I was saying earlier. We're talking about Outkast and Missy, and he's that. I'm not saying he's that in this generation. Don't quote me on that sense, but the type of artist that if they're coming out with something, you're like, yo, what's he about to do next? And he's that guy when it comes to this era. I would say Travis is one of those as well, but Chromacopia is him doing what he does,
I
and
agree.
and
Yeah.
he's very consistent in that, and he has album that I think has the potential for the most legs, but again, he's so consistent that we're not even surprised by this.
Yeah.
These are strong albums, man. Like when I'm
Yeah.
sitting there looking at the list, these are
Yeah,
strong.
it was a real strong album, and I guess where some people um get off with having that conversation about Tyler is they be consumed in the antics, and so therefore it doesn't drive them to want to go listen to the music. But it was a very solid project. I don't think the antics had anything to do with the making of this and the songwriting behind it. That album was a very solid, good album. The
All right,
story in it itself was a good album.
right. All right, 5, I got Freddie Gibbs, You Only Die Once. I listened to that album again today. And Freddie's mic performance, man. I mean, really, there could be a case for him to be, MC of the year based on how he's approaching and the different styles and the different flows that he's hitting. Like, he is in pocket on everything. Like, Freddie really, really took it there with this project. And he, the production's on point, you know, sound, topics. He got joints on here. And I think that it's a shame how slept on Freddie is as an MC. And I don't know if that's because he's worked with such great producers like a Mad Lib or, like an Alchemist or a host of others. But this dude, I'm just going to say it, man. He's a borderline great MC. I it's beyond me why he doesn't get that credit. And for the people who are in his class, if you will, his catalog trumps them on many levels. And if we're talking about bar for bar, he's a tough one to deal with. He really is. And he's shown it again. Freddie is consistent.
You got some good
And
bodies of work, man, consistently too.
yeah, man. I mean, when I
There's a
say slept
reason
on,
on
I
the list.
mean, I don't think that when we talk about all-time guys that he's even in the conversation in that way. And I think this is an impact conversation. And like I said earlier in our conversation today, I would like to see how some of the people in previous eras would fare in this digital era, where you understand that, yeah, a hit single is probably not going to happen for you. You know what I mean? Like a quote unquote hit single that many people were able to have in a certain era, they don't happen like that in this era. It's a select few that are going to get a record that's going to get played over and over, like Gunna's Fuck You Mean or something like that. Rappers like a Freddie Gibbs just aren't going to get that. But in a previous era, Freddie would have had hits everywhere. You know what I'm saying? He would have.
Yeah, I mean,
Michael Williams, go ahead.
go ahead.
I was going to say, Michael Williams with the super chat says, I'm not sure anyone has amassed a more impressive catalog over the past decade than Freddie. Nothing borderline about it, Mike. He's great. Yeah, I agree.
Freddie's been putting
I
in
shouldn't
work.
even be hesitant to say it.
Yeah, he's been putting in work. He was on my list as well. Like, I feel like the consistency is there. Him rapping is there. Like him spitting. Yeah, it made it to my top 10. There's no no argument here with that one.
You know what? I'm sorry. I actually had Freddie at 4 because I switched this. I put Kendrick's G and X at 5.
Okay.
I'm sorry because I listened to both albums, and yeah, I'm sorry I'm going back, guys. I listened to both albums, and I was like, yeah, I can't put this album over Freddie's. Now, obviously, Kendrick has some outstanding moments. The Heart, of course, Part 6. He has some bangers, some anthems, and all of that. But I think if we're gonna judge the album for album, I would have to, say GNX is slightly behind. You Only Die Once. Now, let me speak to GNX though. I think that Kendrick delivered as he always does. Now, I think that this delivery was a little bit different than what he normally does. I think that he wanted to make something for Cali, and he existed in that world, and he made that album that kind of fed the streets, if you will. Like he had a song that was the biggest song of the year with Not Like Us, and he gave us an album that was indicative of that record without that perspectives, even him being reflective about Cali, and we hadn't heard that from him in a minute. I think this is a perfect setup album. I will give Kendrick that. The Knock this one out the park, but this one gets you ready for something else big. Kind of like I hate to use a comparison, but the Dynasty for Jay was a good setup album for the Blueprint. It wasn't the one, but it had its moments and kind of let you know that, you know what, I'm not volume 3 right now. I'm getting a little bit more grounded. You know what I'm saying? And I think that those steps in Kendrick getting a little bit more grounded are great things for people to see. And I think that GNX definitely deserves to be in the top 5 because the mic performance alone and the year that Kendrick's had is just undeniable. Number 3, Corday, The Crossroads. It took me a minute to even listen to this album, man. So Ron was telling me about this album for I feel like weeks.
Yeah.
And full disclosure, not a big Corday fan like that. I've always felt like Corday kind of exists in this world where he was a younger guy trying to please the older demo of hip hop enthusiasts and boom bap guys, and I always thought that was unfair to any young artist because you are who your fans are. You know what I mean? Like you can't be that 17-year-old trying to rap to 33-year-olds. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like rap to your rap. And after listening to this album, well put together. And one of the biggest things that stood out to me was how much better of an MC that I felt like Corday was on this album. Very expressive, very intentional. Production was on point. The way it was put together was on point. The features were there. I mean, Wayne went crazy on there, as Wayne normally goes crazy, and Corday, his mic performances on here were very, very good. And Stella at some points. And I think that, in some worlds, if somebody put this as album of the year, I wouldn't be mad at it at all. When I first heard it, I was like, you know what, this could be album of the year. Somebody said, what's Mike's number 5? Number 5 was G and X. I actually got that mixed up. So I'll go over the list again just so people don't get it twisted. I had number 10, Killer Mike's Song for Sinners. Rhapsody is number 9 with Please Don't Cry. LL Cool J's number 8 with The Force. Doche with Alligator Bites, Never Heal is number 7. Tyler the Creator, Chromacopia is number 6. Kendrick Lamar's G and X is number 5. Freddie Gibbs, You Only Die Once is number 4. And Corday's The Crossroads, I got it number 3. Now my number 2 spot, I got Common and Pete Rock, The Auditorium, Volume 1. This was my album of the year for a good portion of this year. And it wasn't one of those things where the guys hit me with something that I didn't expect. I already expected a level of greatness from this collaboration. I mean, Common's tone, who he is as an MC, is so I don't want to say it's so reminiscent to CL Smooth in a certain sense. It's not a far departure from it. And Common is Common, and Pete's Pete. Pete's been consistent. Pete has been producing albums for some of our favorite MCs and doing spot production. He never stopped. Common never stopped. So when these two guys were coming together and the stuff that I was hearing, I was like, yeah, they're gonna knock this out the park, and they did. Pete came through. Common came through. And in my personal opinion, the best hip hop song I've heard all year is This Man, and it's on this album. And I got this album as number 2.
I had this album on my list as well. It wasn't up this high though.
Okay. Now I ain't got Cube on the list, and I love Cube's album. This was a very solid year. There's a lot of really good albums that, aren't on here. All right, I got Missionary as number 1, so you guys can go ahead and kill me now. But let me explain. Best hip hop album I heard all year, and the production on it is next level. It sounds like the next level. Snoop sounds incredible on it. Dr. Dre sounds incredible on it. The features on there are extremely noteworthy. Everybody did their thing on this album from beginning to end. I mean, I tried to go back and listen for skips. There are no skips on this album. I think that one day people will understand, and I hate to sound like that guy, but I think that one day people will be like, you know what? Michael's really on to something. I don't know. It's not too much that I could say that I haven't already said about Missionary. I mean, y'all just listened to me, Wax Poetic, the album last week. And I mean, it's a great piece of work from Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg. I didn't think that Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg could make a record with Tom Petty and Jelly Roll. I didn't think that Dr. Dre and Snoop could make a record with Sting. to sound like that. And honestly, I don't think anybody who else I've listed on this top albums of 2024 would have been able to execute something like that either. And I think that the chances that they took on this album were phenomenal. I think that the execution obviously was next level and phenomenal. And then to add the cherry on top, Dr. Dre added the instrumentals to the end of it as well. And when you listen to the instrumentals that are coinciding with this album, it's just hands down. I mean, it's the best thing I heard all year.
I had it as number 10 on my list.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know. I'm so disappointed. Hopefully it'll move up on people's lists.
No, I think, like I said, when it comes down to music these days, there's certain people that's gonna like it, and people are not gonna like it, and the other ones that's just gonna go with whatever the popular crowd is going with what's liking. And then we have a lot of people that listen to stuff just to hate now. But I wouldn't put them as my number one, but Snoop definitely made it on my number 10. I thought it was a solid effort, and this was a thing that I said about Dre and Snoop. I don't care what nobody say. Whenever they dropped albums, it never sounded like nothing that was out. They never did. When they dropped Chronic, when Dre dropped Chronic, nothing else sounded like the Chronic. When he dropped Doggy Style, nothing else sounded like Doggy Style, and so on and so forth. Like 2001 didn't sound like something that was already out. I feel like these guys always brought something new to the game. And
never go about the next level until Dre did it, man.
Yeah, and I feel like this Missionary album, I feel like it doesn't sound like nothing else that's out anyway either. So, I kind of feel like they always bring a new sound every time they step in. They're just not my number one, but to me, I feel like every time they drop, they're giving something new to the game that doesn't sound like something that's out. They kind of stay in the lane of their own. So, my number one was Kendrick. You know what I'm saying? GNX. I feel like the impact.
Yeah.
The impact, there had a lot of people that was questioning whether he was going to drop around the Super Bowl. I was one of those people that thought he was going to drop after the Super Bowl. So it kind of surprised me when he did drop the album. And I just kind of feel he had the content, the impact was there, the singles were there. I just feel like it was a very solid effort, and it energized hip hop this year. And for that, I feel like that's why it has to be number one. I just felt like what it did around the conversation around it, the impact for it, the how it's been occupying the charts as far as hit quality is on there. I feel like that was when he went back to his roots and his culture of LA and that sound of the West Coast. And I think he did it more so on a cultural level on that album that some people even question I was missing, which kind of like baffles me to an extent, because on Good Kid, Mad City, I mean, he had a song with MC8. I don't know how more West Coast you can get, you know what I'm saying? Like, but I had GNX as my number one. And then Corday, I believe, was my number two.
Okay. Yeah, so we both had Corday very high. I was actually about to roll in a second. I got hella gifts to rap, man. But I know we wanted to talk about where we expect hip hop to go in 2025. What are your thoughts and what are your predictions of? And I know we're gonna have another show before 2025 hits, and we can go a little bit more in depth in this. But what are you spoke about the Super Bowl performance? What are the expectations for 2025?
2025, when I'm looking at the trajectory of who's gonna drop next year, it seemed like it's gonna be a pretty solid year. Travis Scott is expected to drop next year. He always drop major albums usually. Nicki's supposed to drop next year. Drake is rumored to be dropping next year. Lil Baby already released his track list for his album. So he's dropping. Freddie Gibbs and Madlib is actually going to drop. Yep. JID Metro Boomin is going to drop.
Okay.
J-Rock's supposed to be dropping. One of the most interesting projects that's dropping 2025 is Big Sean and the Alchemist. Because Alchemist has been on a nice producer run right now, and I wonder what kind of boost I'll give Big Sean. So that's one of the ones that I'm actually like interested in hearing next year. your man, like T.I. is supposed to drop. Um,
Yeah, the King. Yeah.
yeah, Griselda's dropping, The Roots is dropping, and the game is coming with the documentary 3 that's one of the ones I'm personally checking for.
Ooh.
That's one of the
I'm
ones I'm
checking for
personally
that.
yeah, I'm checking for that one. And then the Clips is supposed to be dropping next year as well. And then it
Right.
says another Nas and DJ Premier album possibly dropping next year. Baby Keem's supposed to be dropping next year, and the Lil Wayne is supposed to be dropping another Carter album. So it
Mm,
looks like, and then Young Thug may be coming next year, and then ASAP is coming next year, and then Kanye Bully is supposed to come next year. So like if everything, and then Cardi and J. Cole, those two. So if everything happens on a trajectory of what was rumored right now, I think next year is going to be a bigger thing for releases in mainstream hip hop.
hmm
So it looks like a pretty good anticipated year for hip hop album drops.
Is Jay-Z gonna drop an album?
I don't know. I know he has plenty of stuff that he could talk about, but
Yeah.
I don't think musically that's where he's at right now.
Yeah.
I haven't even got an
I would
inkling
like to hear a
of
Jay album.
in the studio. I mean, yeah, I want to hear a J album. Because I always want to hear my favorites drop albums. Like that's a solid list. Like I said, I feel like Game has one of the most underrated album runs. And I'm really interested in seeing what a documentary 3 sound like. And will it have Dre production on it, since Dre is kind of like in his creative bag producer wise.
Yeah.
I wonder if you're gonna link back with Dre for that. Like I said, I want to know what a newer ASAP album is gonna sound like, an ASAP Rocky album.
Yeah.
These are people that haven't dropped like that. So it's like I'm interested in these albums that's coming next year.
It's very intriguing. Um, yeah, man. I can't. Well, I know Redman's dropping Muddy Waters 2 on Christmas Eve, which is tomorrow. Yeah,
Mhm.
and Merry Christmas to everybody out there too. I'm looking forward to that. Muddy Waters is personally my favorite Redman album. It's those type of things are bittersweet. And again, I need to stop, trying to hold people to certain standards and just listen to the music for what it is.
Yeah.
And Redman's been spitting crazy for years, and I'm looking forward to what
Which
he
one?
is gonna. Hmm?
Which one? What is the album you're looking most forward to for next year?
Um, I'm not gonna lie to you, brother. Everything you named, I might be going with the documentary 3. The
I want to hear.
Game is a very interesting character, man.
Yeah, I think the one that I'm anticipating the most out of everybody is J. Cole. I do want to hear what Cole has to say right now.
Uh, you know,
Might Delete Later is my honorable mention for my top 10. Might Delete Later was an honorable mention. That was a
yeah,
solid.
it should be. It should be. It should be. I think that Cole is interesting in how he's going to approach this, but I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm expecting him to give us an album of the year, and I could be undershooting Cole, but that's kind of where I'm at with him right now, man. I mean, I hope he proves that wrong, but I know that he does have probably the most highly anticipated album of 2025. I don't think Cardi's dropping. It's no point.
Nah, Cardi has the drop next year.
She ain't got to do nothing.
I mean,
like,
I feel like she has the drop next year, man. As far as the interest of people still have for her music, she has the drop next year. I think if she doesn't drop next year, she's just gonna possibly be irrelevant to the music world, and she's just gonna be known as a figure of Cardi B, which is not bad, but it's just like I always say
yeah,
to be in the game, give us the music, you know.
you're gonna
Um,
be in the game. You got to be in the game.
gotta be in the game. You want to say you're a rapper, rap, and I
Yeah,
always
man.
say so. Um, I mean, her first album, that's a tough album to try to top.
Yeah.
You know,
But
so
I mean, that's the game, though. That's what superstars have to do. Superstars have to follow big records. That's just part of the job. But
Man, but yeah, I'll say Cole is my most anticipated one. I'll say the game is second, and I say I'm looking forward to what the Clips album is gonna sound like.
agreed. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the clips as well. And
I wanna know what the production sounds like.
my biggest question mark with the clips is Chad involved. And that's a big question mark for me. Mad Max says ASAP's 2025 album of the year, Harlem. I'm with you, man. I want to see ASAP win. I love when ASAP's in his bag.
Yeah, man. Lil Durk's supposed to. I guess that album is coming. Uh,
Mm,
and then I see Isaiah Rashad, and then Central
okay.
C, Griselda. Saba and No ID and Busta Rhymes is actually supposed to be dropping an album too. So I'm really looking forward to what a J Rock album sounds like next year too, especially coming off pretty much everybody else TDE dropped this year except J Rock.
Mhm.
So I want to know what J Rock has for us next year.
It says, or Mad Max with the super chat says, or Playboy Cardi, LOL for the for the young niggas. Yeah. All right, well, let me get up out of here, man. I got hella shit to rap and all that. What you doing for Christmas?
Man, being with the family, man. Trying to
Yeah,
get
that's
in the Christmas spirit, man. In Florida, it's hard to feel real Christmassy.
yeah.
When you get in the snow, it's been cold, then it'll go back to being warm, then cold again. So, it's just kicking with the family. I'm looking forward to.
Well, that's what's up, man. Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night. We're gonna see y'all next week, and
Yes, sir.
yeah, we're gonna really shoot these projections for next year and kind of wrap up all these superlatives of 2024, because I think it has been a very interesting year looking at this album list, man. But hip hop is continuing to evolve, even in a slower year, if you will.
Man, I was just interested in seeing what the next wave is gonna look like. You know,
Yeah, it's wide open.
the new stuff,
Right.
like the new sound.
Yeah, that's why I like Missionary, but we'll talk about that later. All right, hit like and subscribe,
Yes.
everybody. Appreciate y'all joining us, and we're gonna holler at y'all next week.
Yep.